Making your way in the world today takes everything you got. Taking a break from all your worries sure would help a lot. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our Fionna and Cake discussion live stream. Wouldn't you love to get away where everybody knows your name? Thankfully, you all know my name here in this little space that we've crafted in the corner here of the internet in our live discussion streams. Welcome, welcome, everyone. As always, I'm your host, Covey, and I'm joined once again by our best friend from across the pond, Tom from Curmudgeon Media. Tom, welcome to the bar.
As I was searching for this video so I could have it up on my screen, I saw a video titled Midwest Emo Arthur, and y'all can make of that what you will. I don't know what it means. It had the picture of Arthur's angry fist.
Ah, well,
you know, his little angry fist when he's about to lay the smack down on DW, when he's about to absolutely fucking spark out his infant sister.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, we know where your head's at. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our weekly Fionna and Cake discussion stream. We are here to talk about the finale, the last 2 episodes of this miniseries, question mark. Maybe there's more. I don't know. That's something we'll talk about today. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Magical is here in the chat. Ed is here as well. Shadow is here. Hello. Toon is here as well. Recovering from COVID. I am so sorry to hear that you got COVID, Toon, but I hope that you are feeling better, and I'm wishing you a swift recovery. Robin is here as well. Hello. Thanks so much for being here, everyone. I am so excited to dig into these episodes. We have a lot to say. I rewatched the episodes kind of late last night, and I actually weirdly enough, I don't have as many notes as I did like for the previous episodes, but I feel like all my notes for this time are kind of just like jumping off points to broader discussions that maybe we'll get into today. I also am kind of thinking like I'm still processing these episodes, and I'm still processing the entire 10 episodes like as a whole unit as well too. You know, as we saw in the finale, there's lots of callbacks to the first couple episodes, lots of like kind of tying things together. And so I really have been thinking about potentially even doing a video for this series, kind of similar to just how like my Infinity Train analysis videos have been in the past, just like kind of digging into the symbolism and the meaning of the season and, you know, all the parallels and all the character analysis. Like there's a lot I'm still kind of processing and thinking of as well. So maybe we won't get into like everything in this discussion today. But I have a lot to say. I have a lot to think about. So I don't know how you are feeling.
Is the phrase "I might make a video about this" on anyone's bingo sheet? Because I swear you say that every time we watch something. Like, yeah, really, I might make. I
really want to make a video about this, and then it just never happens. No, but genuinely, I do think I will make a video about Fionna and Cake because I feel like this type of like I don't know. It just kind of reminds me of like the way I approached book 4, right? And like the video that I made with book 4 of Infinity Train. And I feel like I'm still kind of piecing together what the season is trying to say. And in piecing that together, that could be like a fun analysis script, you know? And that's kind of how I did it with Infinity Train book 4, actually. When I first started writing that script, I actually didn't know exactly what I wanted to say. And it was through the process of writing the script that the season finally like clicked for me and fell into piece. And I was like, oh, it's like coming together, and I got really excited, and that made me like want to finish that script, right? And so I'm hoping that the similar thing happens now with Fionna and Cake, where as I'm thinking about it and writing and working on this, it sort of like clicks and falls into place for me. But all that being said, we do have stuff to talk about today. Shia is here in the chat too. Hello, welcome. These episodes felt less deep than others. I don't know. Yeah, there's I think too, and you have something there. Your fate is trans Fionna. Yeah, Shadow, that's actually no joke, something I'm thinking about as well. I think I mentioned it maybe last stream or a couple streams ago that like there definitely could be a trans reading of Fionna and all her world is gender bent and all that stuff. I think that could be something to pull together for sure. Thank you, Magical, for the kind words. That's very, very sweet of you. Oh, Shadow, the book 4 is your favorite. Oh, thank you. That means a lot to me. It's one of my favorites I've done too. So thank you for the kind words. You guys are really sweet. First of all, I just kind of wanted to address, I guess, a little bit of an elephant in the room. When it comes to this finale.
Psychic tandem war elephant?
A psychic tandem war elephant, a 2-headed flying elephant that I want to address here.
I do actually use a clip in my Steven Universe video. I do use a clip of the psychic tandem war elephant. When I say the phrase, let's talk about the elephant in the room, I cut to a clip.
Nice, yeah.
Of the psychic tandem war elephant.
He is hard to ignore when he's in the room.
Well, you say that, but they did put him in their gold room and then forget about him for many months.
Oh my god.
So they kind of did successfully ignore him.
Fair enough. Well, this time we will be addressing the elephant. I don't know. So I've been kind of not necessarily like avoiding or seeking out other people's opinions on this finale, but I'm just a chronically online person, so of course like the discourse is going to trickle in one way or another. And I've been seeing a little bit of, I don't want to say contention or anything like that, but there have been dissonant opinions on this finale. Some people really like some stuff, some people really dislike some of the stuff. I will admit for myself, there are things that I, felt like maybe we spent a little bit too much time on, or maybe I would have liked to see something else, take up some of that runtime, airtime instead of what we got. Like, of course, I'm going to have my thoughts and opinions and all this. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about that in today's stream. But just to be clear and just to be upfront, I'm far less interested in talking about like, oh, this is a thing that I liked, or oh, this is a thing that I didn't like. And I'm more so interested in taking this story in as good faith as possible and basically interpreting everything as if this was an intentional story choice from the writers and creators. And instead of asking myself like, oh, why did they do that? And like decide that I don't like it. I want to ask that question. I want to ask the question, why did they do that? And ask ourselves like, what could they possibly be telling us about the story based off of these choices? What could this possibly be adding thematically? What could this be like conveying, what message could this be like underscoring or conveying with this like particular choice. So that's kind of what I want to explore more in this finale. And of course, like I think it's unavoidable that we're gonna eventually touch on things that we like or don't like, but I just don't want that to be the focus of today's stream, if that makes sense.
We both liked the episode anyway.
We both liked it. Yeah, I think generally speaking, we both enjoyed it. Of course, we have our nitpicks, but just broadly speaking, I really enjoyed it.
The way I worded it to you yesterday was I gave the analogy of a cake.
Yes. Yes.
Like Fionna and Cake is this delicious 4-course meal where it had, you know, a delicious, nourishing starter and just a beautiful plate of entrees, and the main course was perfect.
Yeah.
And then you get to dessert and they hand you this cake, and it's like 50% cake and 50% icing. And it's not like either of these particular ingredients are bad. It's really good icing. It's beautiful buttercream icing, and the cake is like a delicious Victoria sponge. The ratios are just wrong. No Victoria sponge should be 50% icing, which is the way I put it. Because I still liked the ending. I liked what they did. There were certain things I would have liked to have seen that they didn't touch upon. I just came out of it feeling a bit like Fionna had been a little shortchanged.
Sure.
And I would have liked to have seen a bit more exploration of certain themes they touch upon. That we'll talk about. I just would have liked to have seen more. It's not like I disliked the material we got. I just wanted more of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I think something that we'll talk about, and maybe now is the time to talk about it, but like, no, I think we should save this discussion for the end. But I think like there could potentially be more, right? There could potentially be a season 2.
It could be more. And Toon is right as well that like the whole saga has set the bar so high.
Yeah.
An ending that falls short of that is more noticeable.
For sure.
And it does feel like it has less depth. It has depth. Like Lord knows it has depth. It just feels like it has less depth because every other episode that preceded it felt so much more layered, and what was so much more layered.
Yeah.
And ending things is hard. Like ending anything is hard.
Yeah.
Ending a movie is always going to be a bit easier than ending any kind of TV
Of course,
show,
yeah, like a short story, right?
Because the longer you keep that story going, the more pressure there is to make that ending satisfying.
For sure. And not to mention that Fionna and Cake is not just a 10-episode miniseries, right? Like we're building on the foundation of a 10-season 4 movies. Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. Like this is a finale, right? And so like it's hard.
It a finale? We don't know.
Question mark,
I didn't
right?
I didn't look at it as a finale. I think Adventure Time had its finale, and that will
right. Yeah, Come Along With Me was the finale, right?
But yeah, I don't know. It's very Fionna and Cake has felt simultaneously quite self-contained, but it is impossible to watch it without having a fairly intimate knowledge of Adventure Time.
yeah, for sure.
But I mean, shall we get into it?
Let's get into it. Let's dive in. Shadow seems to kind of agree with you on your feelings of Fionna feeling a little bit left behind. And definitely what Toon said. And Toon and Tom, both of you have said it. The depth is definitely there. And we'll get into it. Let's get into it. So the first episode, Casper and Nova, I loved this episode. I know some people didn't like it.
This episode was really good.
I absolutely love this episode. First, we open with a Fionna dream sequence. Again, kind of calling back, right, to the first episode.
Where did we leave off?
Well, we left off in Jerry episode. The portal opened, right, and Simon and the scarab fell through. Golb's eye showed up in the Lich's eye, or Golb's head showed up in the Lich's eye, or whatever, right? And then they fell through. Fionna and Cake jump back into Simon's head, so we are to assume that they are back in their world now. And so when Fionna wakes up, in this dream sequence, we find out, right? We first think that, they're back in their magical world, right? But I think visually they kind of give you hints that this is not quite what we think it is, right? With the color style and kind of the pastel aesthetic, right? It's kind of harkening back to that first dream sequence in the first episode. You know, I think like we're once again, Fiona's arc, right, really comes into this idea of escapism, trying to escape the mundane through fantasy. And I feel like while one interpretation, or like one way you could look at this finale is say like, oh, Fiona's arc got a little shortchanged, and I think that that's a fair assessment. The way that I read it is that it's the show has a little bit of a nuanced take when it comes to dealing with fantasy and when it comes to dealing with escapism. And I want to get more into that when we get to like the very end of the finale, when we get into like the fight with the scarab and kind of like the sequence that goes on there. But in this dream sequence, right, it's pretty clearly a manifestation of like Fiona's conflict, right, of how she feels about magic, right? You know, the beginning of the show, at the beginning of the show, we know that Fionna wanted her world to be magical. That was like her one true desire, right? And then now that she's been on this journey where she's seen like, hey, maybe magic isn't all that it's cracked up to be.
And it's more than just that. Like she has this very self-centered worldview.
Right.
At the beginning of the story, because she talks about her dreams when she's on the bus, and she's like,
"None of your dreams matter, only mine matters."
None of your dreams matter, only mine matter. Mine are special, and yours are not special. I'm the main character,
which we know is not true, right? We know that all their dreams are true.
She very much has a case of main character syndrome, which is ironic because she is the main character. But maybe dethroning her from her own sense of main character syndrome is why it's important to kind of give her a little less in the end. I don't know. That's one way you could look at it, but you know,
yeah,
I don't know if anything I just said meant sense. When I said give her less, I meant shortchange her, but you know,
sure, yeah.
It's down for debate whether or not an individual considers that they shortchanged her anyway. I feel like they did, but that's just me.
Yeah. I don't necessarily feel like that. I can understand why someone would feel like that, but I don't necessarily feel like that. So I really love the horror of this dream sequence too, right? Like Gary being this monstrous wad of gum that eats a cookie version of Fionna in front of her in the most horrifying way. Yeah, he becomes the thing. Yeah, absolutely. And then we see like the most horrific vampire, Marshall Lee, who gets on fire in the sunlight and is in horrific pain, right? And you know, we start to.
I don't know if there are any Drawfee fans in the chat, but Vampire Marshall Lee was like a Jacob horse.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're so right. Very long.
Just long.
Yeah. So I think like these, you know, Fionna obviously had her encounter with the Candy Queen, right? And so she knows like, oh, this candy monarch is not maybe all it's cracked up to be. And also the vampire world, right? She had a horrible experience with those vampires. So maybe being a vampire isn't all it's cracked up to be. So, and also I think that this dream is starting to plant those seeds in her head, right? Where later on in the finale, she starts to question, right? You know, maybe it's not up to us to make this decision, right? Like, there are other people who are going to be affected by this. And I think like this is starting to really show her, right? Like, oh, maybe Marshall doesn't want to be a vampire who doesn't want to like go out in the sun, right? And all that stuff. So
yeah, it's like it's not demanding that everybody changes to fit what she wants out of life.
Exactly. And then finding
to roll with the punches and the ebb and flow of the world as it exists.
Exactly. And then finding out that LSP is made out of spaghetti as he gets eaten alive by squirrels.
I mean, I really feel like that probably went through S&P. Like I don't feel like that was spaghetti to begin with. I feel like they did some Day of the Dead shit.
Oh my god, yeah, for sure.
And then they probably got a note back from S&P like, I'm sorry, you can't do this.
Yeah.
It's not allowed.
Yeah.
Make it spaghetti.
But it was hilarious. I thought that was so funny. And then of course at the end of this dream sequence, right, we find none other than Simon Petrikov all fucked up and twisted and shoved into the freezer or whatever, right? And
Mm.
of course, that is the manifestation of Fiona's guilt. We saw her at the end of the last episode. She's like, maybe we don't want to curse Simon, right? And so there's clearly a lot of inner conflict going on in Fionna here. And I know that Tom, when we talked about this these two episodes offline, we were saying how maybe we would have liked a little bit more of that like introspection, that more kind of like character, more cerebral kind of exploration of this character. And I feel like this dream sequence is doing a lot of that heavy lifting. I totally see why you would have wanted more.
I don't want the dream sequence to do heavy lifting. Like, the use of the phrase heavy lifting implies that it has to do the bulk of the storytelling when it could have been more evenly distributed over a selection of different scenes instead of like 3 things, which ultimately it was. And like, it's not like I'm not okay with that. It's still a good finale and it still checks the boxes that it needs to. I just would have liked more. Like, I don't feel like I don't feel like anybody can turn around and tell me that more of that would have been a bad thing. And if we agree that more of it wouldn't have been a bad thing, then we also must agree that something was missing. Even if it's missing only a little, even if it's like not missing to the degree like that it spoils everything, because it totally doesn't. It's not like that. Like, it's still a good finale.
Yeah.
But like good, I feel like good is a scale, there are good finales and then there's over the garden wall, perfect, amazing, incredible endings where everything just fits perfectly. And it fell a little short of that for me. And I'm fine with that. Like, ultimately, this is one of those shows where the story really doesn't ride on how the ending plays out. I feel like the boots on the ground experience of watching this show has just been so satisfying from episode to episode that I'm not at all bothered that the finale didn't quite meet the standards set by previous episodes.
Sure.
It did what it needed to do. It succeeded in what it needed to do.
Sure. I will say, like, I totally respect your opinion, Tom, and I totally see where you're coming from. I will say, for me, I haven't quite landed on how I feel yet. Like, I there's a part of me that wants to say that we got enough of Fionna. I just don't know how I feel about it yet.
Yeah, it's tricky because it's like, it's not like I feel like we didn't get enough of Fionna, but I don't know. It's complicated.
Yeah. And I think it's fine. Also, like, the episode just came out like 3 days ago. I think it's fine that we don't have a solid opinion about it yet.
When you're like being graded in university and it's like, okay, you need to get 50% to get a passing grade. And Lord knows this did better than 50%. Like, that's not like a direct parallel, but like, follow my logic here. You could get 50% in a paper in university, and that's enough. Like, you have enough. You've done enough to pass the grade. But it's not the same thing as getting like a 75 or an 80. When every other episode prior to this, I feel was dealing 80 and above.
Right.
If that makes sense. So, like, we can agree that there was enough. Like, if there wasn't enough, then it would have been a bad finale. If there wasn't enough, then we wouldn't have been able to come away with this with a concrete feeling of where Fionna stands in the story, which we do. And we can also both at least agree that we deserved a conversation between Simon and Marceline.
For sure. That would have definitely been nice to see. Yeah.
That was an emotional thread that has been left hanging. But that's the thing with television, because we don't know if this truly is the end of the story. At this point, it's like,
and again, like I said, I have been thinking about these things too, and like I kind of said at the beginning, like, I want to take everything in good faith. So it's like, yeah, like, maybe it would have been really nice to get a scene with Marceline at the end, but they did make a couple of choices with that end scene with Simon, and we'll get to it when we get to it, but I do want to talk about it, of like maybe why they would have made those choices, right? So again, I want to focus more on like asking why did they make these choices rather than focusing on like, they didn't do this thing I like, or they did do this thing I like. I totally agree with you. It would have been awesome to see Marceline. I think that they kind of left us hanging there, and it would have been really nice to see. But I want to, when we get to the end of the end, I want to ask ourselves maybe why they made those choices that they did, and my interpretation of that.
Yeah, this is the thing with criticism, though, isn't it? Because it's like, it's completely fine to criticize something, to acknowledge that it didn't quite cover all the ground you wanted it to, while also highly respecting the creators as artists and highly respecting
Yeah.
the nature of the material that we did get.
Exactly. Exactly.
Like, I mean, Lord knows you're a fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. You know this. Like,
everyone knows this.
everyone knows this. I love Blade Runner. Like, in terms of the material that exists in Blade Runner, it's literally genre defining. It's some of the finest material of that type.
Yeah.
But it's also extremely boring if you're not in a very specific mood to watch a very specific kind of film.
Sure.
And it's missing things. And by the time you get to the sequel that corrects all of those things that the original was missing, you can't claim that the original was flawless or that the original nailed everything if you can also acknowledge that the sequel did pretty much everything better than the original did. I still love Blade Runner. I still enormously respect the artistic integrity of that.
For sure,
film.
for sure.
You know?
And that's how I want to approach it, you know?
That's like all of these thoughts can exist in one space.
Exactly,
like
exactly,
you know,
exactly.
Lord knows the people who made the show know this. They're probably looking at this right now as creatives, like, oh, we could have done that better, you know, or I kind of wish we'd had more time to do that, or like,
yeah, and that's
like,
just
you know,
the way art is, right? That's how being that's what being an artist
that's how
is.
being an artist is. It's like it's just about it's about having the discourse in a respectful way.
Exactly.
I always feel really bad. I never want to feel like I'm dunking on something,
Of
because
course,
I know how hard it is to make a piece of art, let alone a big piece of art with all these unwieldy moving pieces. It's bloody difficult to do.
Absolutely. So yeah, all that to say that we're being totally as respectful and good faith as possible. Anyway, let's keep going. They wake up from the dream, and you know, we kind of have a moment with Fionna and Cake. I think that the person at the ice rink is the gender bent version of Tiffany, which is funny. It's just nice to see these little characters that
I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah, I think
that's so true.
Yeah, I just think that's funny. A lot of these little callbacks. Fionna notices Gary and Marshall Lee, and they're holding hands, of course, and she becomes an insert for all of us shippers who are like, look, they're holding hands. Oh my gosh.
I love the way she like gets down on her knees and like points at their hand and goes like, what is
this? Yeah, I love that. That was so cute.
It must be weird for her though to like leave for a few weeks and come back, and like these two people that you know but they have no idea, like neither of them have ever met as far as you know.
And now they're dating.
Like, dating. It's like, what the fuck? How did this happen?
Yeah, that was really cute. And then their spit take reaction when Cake like stretches out and is like, yeah, I can talk now. And they do their little spit take was really cute. I just thought that was a funny frame when they both do their little spit takes. It was cute.
I feel like my response to a talking cat would be a bit more severe. Well, maybe it wouldn't. Maybe I would just be shocked. Maybe I would just stand there dumbfounded and wondering if somebody had slipped something in my drink.
Yeah. Fionna reacting to Gary and Marshall was adorable. I loved it.
Wait a second.
Yes.
Gary and Marshall. Isn't Gary Marshall a famous director?
Is he?
Yeah. Gary Marshall, American screenwriter and film director.
Oh my God.
Pretty Woman, Princess Diaries, Runaway Bride.
Did he know that he was going to predict the gay ship of all time?
Surely that's a reference, right?
It could be.
Like Gumball was never called Gary before until this.
Right.
I think Gary Marshall worked on American sitcoms back in like the 80s so funny. As well. What did Gary Marshall do? You'd recognize Gary Marshall because Gary Marshall has been in things you've seen. Do you remember the episode of? I'm sorry, I'm derailing things. Do you remember the episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine where there's that like serial thief or something who's an old man and Boyle catches him and he's trying to convince everyone that he's the guy?
I don't remember this, but sure.
Okay, well, he also voices, I think his name's Abe in BoJack Horseman, which you haven't seen, but he's like he's the weird fish guy that they bring in to direct Secretariat after Kelsey gets booted. So people in the chat who've seen BoJack Horseman, that's him. That's Gary Marshall.
I see.
I want to know if he did anything on Cheers, because I know he worked on like Happy Days and stuff.
Oh,
So
that's Tune is right. Bubby's voice. So Bubby's I thought I heard a familiar voice somewhere in there, and that's probably what it was. Anyway, I wanna move on.
How dare you?
I want to talk about the Lich. Can we talk about the Lich?
No.
Okay, moving on then.
Moving on, no.
I freaking love the Lich sequence in this episode. So we talked about the Lich obviously last week, and about how he as a character was paralleling Simon, right, in his loss of purpose, in his depression now, right, that he like doesn't have any meaning to keep going, and so he's just wholly disinterested in anything anymore. And then we get this sequence, in this episode where we see him like praying to Golb, and he's like on his knees, like splayed out, right, and like begging and pleading with Golb that he is like desperate for a new purpose. He wants to know like what was the reason for like his purpose so far, and he's like desperately praying to like give his life some sort of meaning, right? And meanwhile Simon is like there next to him being like, oh, I can relate. I can heavily relate with this ungodly being of chaos and death. Like I can connect with this god.
It's like the Lich doesn't care about Simon and only cares about Golbetty.
Right.
And he's like actively ignoring Simon. Meanwhile, Golbetty doesn't give a rat's ass about the Lich and is like, okay, whatever. You're a weird cube now.
Yeah. Yeah. So obviously
she just as easily could have been like, okay, your new purpose is crocheting, and I'm gonna send you back into the universe.
Right. But she was just like, I'm tired of you.
From now on, your purpose is to be the greatest crocheting master in every universe.
She could have said that, but instead she was like, you're going to be a cube now.
You're a cube now.
First of all, that reveal that is what those cubes are that's floating around Golb, that was just like such a cool reveal. Like that was just like fun in my eyes. Like that we don't even necessarily know if that is what those cubes are. Right? Like
creepy.
I was
it just raises questions.
Exactly.
Like, are those cubes all just like the Lich from various dimensions, or
are they like different primordials that like
different primordial beings that have pissed off Golb?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Or are they something else? Golb is an all-powerful being that can turn anything into a weird cube. So what do we know? One of them could be Gary Marshall.
One of them could be Gary Marshall.
One of them could be Gary Marshall. There's no evidence that it's not Gary Marshall.
Yeah, so. Yeah. Well, at least now we know what Golbetty does, in her endless void in her spare time. She's just out there playing Tetris, like
3D Tetris.
3D Tetris. Yeah. Turning the Lich and all of her people who annoy her into Tetris pieces.
3D Tetris a thing? That sounds like
I'm
fun.
sure it's a thing. I would be surprised if it wasn't a thing.
Tetris.
But yeah, definitely raises more questions than answers. But it was just like a fun moment where I was like, oh, so that's what those cubes are. Like, oh my gosh, such a fun reveal.
And it seems as though I mean, Golb is evil, right? Or Golb is chaos. Golb isn't necessarily evil.
Right.
Golb is chaos.
Golb
is amoral, as far as we know.
Right.
But clearly, there is enough Betty in there.
Yes.
That Betty has some form of control.
Absolutely.
Like
yeah.
Lucidity.
Yeah.
In her form as Golbetty. It's like, are they one, or is it one of those things where, kind of like Prismo, anyone can become them?
Right. Right.
Because of interdimensional fuckery. I wouldn't mind being Golb. I doubt Golb deals with lower back pain. So if Betty is looking to delegate,
to switch, yeah.
Yeah.
So the Lich.
Online, you can find me. You can pop me an email.
Oh my god. So the Lich gets Tetrised. And I feel like the Lich, we talked about him last time as a parallel to Simon in his loss of purpose, and in this episode I feel like it really hammered home that he is like this symbol, right? He's like a metaphor for those people in life who rely on external, either motivators or external expectations when it comes to finding your own life purpose, right? Because this whole series is about like finding purpose in your life and finding meaning. And obviously, finding purpose is something that one has to determine for themselves. You can't necessarily like have like your parents or your family or whatever, come to you and be like, you're gonna be a doctor or you're gonna be a lawyer, right? And just be like, okay, I'm gonna be a doctor or a lawyer, and just like do that, right? I mean, there are plenty of people who do that, right? But then they're like miserable on the inside because they're like living their lives for other people. And I really saw the Lich as kind of like almost a cautionary tale of that, right? Like if you are living your life for another person, like you might as well just be a cube. Like you're not even living at that point, right? Like because you're just like,
And who else is living their life for another person?
all the parallels, it's all connecting together.
All connected.
It all connected, yeah.
Bush did 9/11.
But we get lots of parallels, right, between the Lich and Simon, the Lich and Betty. And so, yeah, I really like the way that they kind of took the Lich in this direction. Like, he was this like kind of force of nature more in the Adventure Time series, and now he's like
now
more.
He's just a block.
Now he's just a cube, but he's like kind of this like complicated, humanized character that I really appreciate. That I'm glad that they added this like layer of depth to him, because I feel like he's a much more interesting character to me in this way as a cube.
He's just like a dork-ass loser. He's just like a simp.
Yeah.
He's a gold simp.
Just a gold simp, exactly.
Gold simp, fucking dork-ass loser.
Yeah, and exactly magical, just exactly what you said. It sounds like what Betty did for Simon. Yeah, there's lots of parallels there, right?
That's what I was saying. That's what I said.
Exactly. I'm just connecting the dots.
I didn't say those exact words, but that's what I implied when I said
yes.
Who else lived their life for somebody else.
We're connecting the dots. So yeah, I really love the way that they tied the Lich's story into everything. I thought that was really well done.
Indeed. I was expecting we'd see the Lich at some point.
Yeah.
I didn't expect that this is what they do with the Lich.
Right. Yeah.
I guess that's like another thing. Again, I don't want to say that this felt like a missing piece, but something that made this finale feel perhaps less impactful compared to other episodes is it felt very, with the exception of a couple of bits that took me by surprise, it felt quite beat by beat, the finale, compared to the previous 9 episodes, which feel very like, oh, that's not what I expected they would do. I mean, the whole of Fionna and Cake doesn't feel like what we expected they would do.
Right.
What began as something that felt to the cynics among us, such as myself, to be fan service. Like, oh, they're making a Fionna and Cake show.
Right.
Or fan service. And then it turns out to be absolutely phenomenal. And everything they did with the Lich being a part of that. Like, I was not expecting, whenever the Lich shows up, he's always the big bad, but he's nothing. He's just like awkward middle management who's been waiting for a promotion for a millennia.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now here he is. But
here he is, become a Tetris block.
Now I am become block.
Now he become block. A great end to his character. So then we get this little monologue from Simon after that, right? Where he gets his chance to quote unquote apologize to Betty, right? For quote unquote wasting his second chance. But says that now he does finally have a purpose, right? And we talked about how, Simon, his motivations to putting on the crown are not necessarily as noble as maybe he seems to imply, right? Like he's like, oh, this world depends on me, losing myself and putting on this crown, but without realizing that he is like martyring himself, right, for a purpose that is not really necessary, right? Like they don't need magic in their world, but he is kind of rationalizing it in this way because he wants to forego his existence, right? He wants to escape from his pain. Again, that the theme of escapism. He wants to run away from his grief. And so he wants
to go to the proverbial Cheers bar.
Exactly. And become the Ice King, right? So you know, he's throwing away, so he says like, oh, I've thrown away my second chance and that's why I have to put on the crown, without fully realizing that by putting on the crown he is therefore throwing away his second chance, right? And so obviously this whole episode is him coming to that realization.
This episode kind of reminded me a bit of the episode of Steven Universe called what's it called? What's the one when it's like snowing and Garnet gives Steven a little smoochie on the forehead and transfers her future vision power to him temporarily.
Right.
And he goes on this whole adventure of seeing everything that will go wrong, or like, you know, going on basically like a miniature kind of journey of self-realization.
Yeah.
It kind of, in a weird way, it kind of reminded me of that. Like, instead of communicating with Simon by words, Gold Betty is just like, all right, fuck it, I'll just show you.
Yeah.
I'll just show you.
Yeah.
I also liked how they showed us the mechanics of how the scarab is immortal, and the mechanics of how his immortality works. I think it was interesting the way they showed us that, because obviously Gold Betty tries to destroy him and then quickly realizes she can't.
Yeah,
and she keeps trying again and again and again, and he just keeps breaking into more
little beetles. Yeah.
And then she's just like, okay, fuck, I'm just go away, go somewhere else.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because I want to talk more about Gold Betty and the scarab and that whole thing. And maybe now we can do that. Obviously the next thing in my notes is about Shelby and Beth, but we can get to that. But no, it's interesting to me that Gold Betty, because as I was watching it for the first time, I was like, you know, this lady just cubed the ultimate being of death and didn't even blink, like it was nothing, right? And yet there's this like beetle man and she can't like do anything about it. I was kind of questioning like what is going on. And obviously there could be some like quote unquote lore reasons behind it, right? Like, oh, the Lich is a scholar of gold, maybe he's like not quite on the same power level, you know. The scarab kind of addresses to the same boss, right? So maybe they're on the same level. I think like that could be an explanation. But the way that I also saw it was Gold Betty has a very specific goal in mind, right? She specifically wants to keep Simon safe. She specifically wants to keep Simon from putting on the crown. And we don't really know how much Gold Betty knows about what's going on in Fionna and Cake's universe and everything, but I feel like there could have even been a part of her that like intentionally let the scarab go into Simon's head.
Keep in mind a couple of things. First of all, the Lich answers to Gold.
Right.
Right? The Lich is completely within Gold's jurisdiction.
Right.
The scarab isn't. The
right,
scarab
yeah, of course.
The scarab, as we know, answers directly to the boss.
The boss,
who
right.
we still haven't met. And whoever the boss is, they have a higher level of jurisdiction than Gold itself.
Right. Yeah. So of course there's that lore reason, but I also thought it was kind of clever. Like if we are to think that maybe Gold Betty is aware of what's going on in Fionna and Cake's universe, she might have intentionally let the scarab through because
I don't think she did. I think she was actively trying to kill him, but she can't. Like, she was trying. She was really trying. But every time you try to kill him, he just breaks into more pieces. He's immortal. That's how they showed it to us. Because, like, she goes to zap him out of existence, and he just splits into two. And then you get that look on her face, like, what the fuck? Excuse me?
I get that. But also, I also thought it was interesting. Hold on, I'm trying to find where I put this in my notes. Interesting timing. So this happened in the second episode in the finale. Betty. So we get that whole Shelby and Beth sequence with Simon in the alternate world, right? By the time that ends and Betty puts Simon back in his head, it's also at the same time as when Fionna learns her lesson in her world, and she says out loud, "This is the world I want to fight for. I don't want the other world." So I just think it's interesting to me that timing worked out, because Fionna had to come to the realization that she does not want Simon to put on the crown, and I feel like that I don't know, like Betty wants to prevent Simon from putting on the crown. And so I feel like it took both Simon to come to the realization that he shouldn't put on the crown, and Fionna coming to the realization that she doesn't want Simon to put on the crown, both at the same time, for Gold Betty to be like, okay, things are cool now. I don't think it was like intentional or anything like that, but I do think Gold Betty's priority was keeping Simon from putting on the crown, and therefore maybe like not as caring about what happened to Fionna. Because if Scarab gets rid of Fiona's universe altogether, then Simon has no reason to put on the crown, right? And so like, I don't know. I feel like it just makes more sense to me than saying like, oh, she just didn't have the power to defeat Scarab. It's a little more interesting to me to think that Fiona's arc also played into a factor in Betty's decision making of like when
if that's the case, then why did Betty try so hard to destroy him? If that's the case, why didn't Betty just let him go? Because she doesn't just let him go. She actively is trying to zap him out of existence, and it's not working.
I think I can justify that by saying she was trying to prevent Scarab from killing Simon. And then once she realized that he was no longer trying to actively kill him and just get into his head, she was just kind of like, okay. That's how I saw it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't feel like we know enough about the way that Gold's powers work to concretely say anything anyway. I think evidence is there that she's trying to kill him and that she can't.
Yeah, I think that's there. I just thought it was interesting that both Fionna had to come to this realization of no crown, and Simon had to come to this realization of no crown, like at the same time, essentially.
Yeah, I saw that, I guess, more as like poetry than some kind of like machination of Gold Betty. I saw that more as like poetic storytelling.
Sure, yeah, and I think neither of our interpretations are wrong per se.
Yeah, no, totally. There's enough wiggle room. That's the beauty of these kinds of stories.
Absolutely.
The ambiguity allows you to kind of let your imagination run wild and
absolutely
look at it in different, interesting ways.
Absolutely. Magical says, I didn't see that Shermy and Beth were going to appear in the series. That's actually the next thing I wanted to talk about was Shermy and Beth.
Sheth, if you will.
So we first saw Shermy and Beth at the end of the actual Adventure Time series finale, right? So they are implied to be future reincarnations of Finn and Jake. They're like thousands of years in the future.
Who voiced Shermy in the original?
I don't know.
I'm unaware if they brought back the original. I'm unaware if they brought back the original Shermy voice actor, because I don't know who voiced Shermy in the original. I know they recast Beth, thankfully, because Beth was originally voiced by Willow Smith, who couldn't be anywhere near anything really if we can avoid it. They've recast. The only recast they've done in this series that isn't good is the one that they couldn't help, which is obviously recasting
Kumail Nanjiani, right? Yeah.
The rest of them all, I'm just like, yeah, get rid of Neil Patrick Harris, get rid of Willow Smith, replace him with actual voice actors.
For sure.
I don't know why the hell they got Willow Smith to begin with. Like, that's the weirdest.
Maybe she was a fan of Adventure Time. I could actually see that.
I can see that, but like, Huge Jacked Man was also a fan of Adventure Time, and I reckon he would have done it. I reckon he would have been in it. I totally reckon Hugh Jackman, Jacked Man, if he got the call, would have been like, yeah, I'll take a pay cut to be in Adventure Time. Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah. So Shermy and Beth, I did see some people talking about this Shermy and Beth sequence and how that this was maybe one of the things that they didn't like about the episodes. I heavily disagree with that. I loved the Shermy and Beth sequences. I thought that it was actually really brilliant to like bring them back in this way. Simon getting put into Shermie's head and having to like learn his lesson that way, I thought was like really clever. Cause like it's fun because these are familiar characters, familiar-ish characters to us, right? Like obviously we didn't get screen time with them, but like they're familiar enough that we can connect with them. And also like they are reincarnations of Finn and Jake. And so the way that I interpreted it as, this episode, this finale really underscores a big theme that has been present throughout the entirety of the show, which is this idea of cycles of life and, cycles repeating and how history repeats itself and things like that too, right? And so the cyclical nature of life and the world, I think, is something that is being underscored in this episode, especially, and we even see it at the end too, when Simon is in therapy and he's with Minerva and she's like, you're gonna forget and relearn and forget and relearn. This is just how life goes sometimes. You have to relearn lessons over and over. And so I thought that bringing back Shermie and Beth in this way as reincarnations of Finn and Jake kind of add to this like cyclical nature of life. And also during this whole sequence, we get so much like callback to season 1 or like the earlier seasons of Adventure Time. We get the scene with the pagelings and like that whole sequence that felt very like, Adventure of the Week, right? Like it felt very low stakes.
I loved it because it felt like a roundabout way of inverting scenes from episode 2.
Yeah, for sure. Can you talk more about that?
Well, Jake, I think we can pretty safely say is dead at this point.
Right.
His absence, we have to take as being purposeful to some degree.
Right.
But Jake was always the one who was more in touch with his own sense of self and sense of place in the world.
Right.
He's kind of like the dude,
right.
Jake did not have a high intelligence stat, but he had a very high emotional and spiritual intelligence. He was a zen-like being, who, unlike Finn, who was extremely egoistic and obsessed with the physical and the now, Jake kind of didn't really care, and that was perfect for Jake. It gave Jake depth, and it also made Jake funny in certain situations. Like you'll remember there's that great episode when the demon in their dad's sword escapes and like traps Jake and sucks all of his blood out. And he's like, you're going to be here forever. And Jake's like, okay, what do you mean? Okay, like this is bad. He's like, well, I don't know. I guess I can get used to it. And he's like, you're not meant to say that. It's, Beth has a very similar energy, and it's not said outright, but it's heavily implied that Beth is perhaps even an actual descendant, like a biological descendant of Jake and Rainicorn, because she has those like powers. She has those Rainicorn portal powers.
Yeah, and the whole like Gibbon storyline too. I love that they brought that back. But anyway, sorry, continue.
And it's perfect that if back in episode 2 it was Jake taking Simon on a little adventure and giving him a heart-to-heart, I really feel like it would have been much more successful.
Oh, of course, right? Finn. But the whole point is that it was Finn and it wasn't successful.
But the whole point is that it was Finn and that it wasn't Jake, and that like it really points to just how much Jake's absence affects the world. Like he was so important to the fabric of the story. But in the absence of Jake, what we can have is Jake's spiritual and biological successor in the form of Beth, who is much, much more capable of communicating these emotional ideas and like revealing these things to Simon that he hadn't even thought about.
I absolutely love that moment. Or sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Perfectly rolling with the situation as well, because like Beth doesn't even believe that.
Yeah, she's like Simon.
But like Jake would, Beth just rolls with it. Beth is just like, okay, this is what we're doing, I guess, and I like this. I'm fine with this. Let's just like roll with it.
I absolutely love that moment, and I think this might have been one of my favorite moments in the entire series, in this entire mini series, where Beth tells Simon, "You're just a kid; you wouldn't understand this, right? Like you need to grow up a little before you understand." I love that so much because obviously we know that Simon is an old curmudgeonly man in the body of this little rabbit boy.
It does speak to a certain level of emotional immaturity,
Exactly.
of emotional
Exactly.
stagnation on his part.
Absolutely. And I love that especially too, because I think it like reinforces this idea, right? Again, I think Adventure Time loves to talk about these themes of growth and change, but I feel like this really underscores this idea that like we're constantly growing and changing, right? Like you can be a 60-year-old man and still have profound lessons to learn, right? To recontextualize your entire life and your entire choices. And so yeah, I absolutely like love that moment for Simon, especially because I can just imagine like, you know, being this old man and this like weird dog being who's like got a magical portal tummy is just sitting there being like, you'll understand when you're older, and you're just like, I'm a naked man in the brain of a rabbit boy. He was naked in there.
Oh yeah, he was.
They had to give us the ass shot one more time.
I mean, he does have.
He's got the cake.
An amazing ass. I will just say. I will say Simon's pretty hot. I'm a fan of Simon. I think that he's like, it's pretty rare to get a case where someone is both a silver fox and a twink at the same time. Like, it's rare.
He pulls it off.
Rare. Somehow he does it.
Oh my gosh.
I like that Shermy is such a fucking knuckle dragger that he just is fine with being a prisoner in his own mind for a bit. He's like, well, I guess I'm here now.
He's just playing video games.
That felt to me to be like an homage to OKKO Let's Be Heroes. Which, have you seen that?
I have not.
Well, there's a thing in OKKO where there's like KO has an alter ego, like a kind of chaotic evil alter ego. And whenever one is in control of the body, the other is stuck in the brain, and there's just like a little PlayStation there for them to play.
Yeah.
So that felt to me to be probably a deliberate.
Oh yeah, that would be cute for sure. Because
obviously Ian Jones Courty did start out on Adventure Time as well.
Yeah, that's true.
So they've got that like pipeline there.
Yeah. Yeah. So really quick before we talk about Casper Nova, I just want to touch on just really quick the story that's going on in the background in the Beth and Shermy universe, right? We got like hints of this. I can't remember where we got hints of this. I think it was maybe like, what's his name? Is it Steve Wolfhard? Is one of the artists on the shows? Is it Steve Wolfhard or Finn Wolfhard? I can't remember. It's not Finn
Wolfhard. Finn Wolfhard sounds familiar.
I can't remember his name. I feel really awful, but I remember he posted a bunch of concept art for a lot of the pups, you know, like so. I
think it's Steve. I think it's Steve Wolfhard.
Yeah, it might be Steve Wolfhard. So basically, just really quick, I want to talk about the lore just because it's fun and I think it's fun. But you know, Gibbon is like this cat character who like stole a magic gem from the Ice Crown or something like that, and is like become a dictator in the future. And like Jake and Rainicorn's descendants have now become like an entire race of beings, and they have like their own kingdom. But like I
don't even want to think about the incestuous implications of that.
Oh god, let's not. But Gibbon is like got this power to like neutralize the pups' powers, right? So he can like take away their magic. But like Beth and Shermy are like these revolutionaries, right? And they're like escaping, and that's why we kind of see all the graffiti that's like power to the pups, right? So I really just like love that storyline, first of all, because it first of all just goes to show you like how endless this universe of Adventure Time really is. There's like countless stories that you can tell in this universe, right? Whether we're connected to our main characters or not. Like I was so invested in this revolution, and we got like 10 seconds of it. So I love Adventure Time. I feel like it could go on forever.
Just like they keep just giving us more stuff that could become more stuff.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, Gibbon is, I think, first introduced in one of the Jake and his child episode. I think it's the
according to Rolly, Gibbon is also a pup.
Gibbon is one of Jake's grandkids. Yeah, he appears in the father-daughter Card Wars episode, I think.
Oh yeah. Okay. Oh yeah, there we go. Apparently he's in the future in that Card Wars episode. That's interesting. Yeah, so I love that they could just like go on with these stories forever. It's just so much fun. And I also feel like this idea, again, I'm gonna dig really deep and read too much into everything.
Naturally.
This idea of like a revolution happening in this world, right? I feel like these two episodes also kind of like harken back to this motif of Adventure Time, which is destiny versus free will, right?
I'm gonna like quickly interject here with a
Please,
quote
yeah.
that I feel is like so relevant to all of this.
Yeah, please.
And the themes of Adventure Time. There's a great quote in Fargo season 2, so you'll remember this when Mike
Get out your bingo
Milligan is
cards.
get out your bingo cards. Mike Milligan is having a brief dialogue with Lou Silverson at the hotel, and he says he starts talking about the word revolution. He says like in astronomical terms, revolution means a cycle.
Right.
That repeats itself,
Oh
right?
my gosh, your brain.
But then he follows that up by saying, which is funny because down here on Earth, revolution means change.
Bro, your
Which is like-
your brain right now is just mind blow. That was, yeah, no,
Which is
that's so
perfect.
true. That's so
Because it's like-
perfect. Yeah.
Like, and then when you think about the themes of Adventure Time, you think of everything stays, you know.
Right, exactly.
Everything stays right where you left it. Everything stays, but it still changes.
Ever so slightly,
You know, and it's
right?
like the idea of like there are certain revolutions that happen in Adventure Time. There are cycles that repeat themselves. There's reincarnation.
Yeah.
But there's also change.
For sure. No, that's so true. I love that.
The idea of having the backdrop, the locus of the thematic thread of this episode be a revolution.
100%. Absolutely 100%. No, that's so true. That fits so beautifully into the whole idea.
Thank you very much the writers of Fargo for being actual fucking geniuses.
Yeah, for sure. I was definitely thinking about it in terms of the like destiny versus free will theme that the show also likes to play with, right? Like again with this idea of cycles and things repeating itself, right? But it changes ever so slightly, right? And so like, do you have the ability to change destiny, right? And we even get like
is perhaps the like there's that phrase that change is the only constant. Does the existence of change simply fold into the idea of something that
exactly
change is itself the thing that repeats?
Exactly. No, absolutely. And I feel like that's such a poetic thing that Adventure Time has constantly played with, right? And I really, you know, I like that idea of this idea of like destiny and fighting against destiny, free will. You know, we even get that little moment from Simon where, you know, he's in Shermie's head and he's like so determined to get the crown. And he's like, I have free will. Do you hear me, Betty? Do you hear me, Betty? And then it cuts to him just like saying out loud in his like, you know, hypnotized trance, like, do you hear me, Betty? And it's like, yeah, she hears you, dude. You are not doing jack shit. Okay. Like, but yeah, I thought that was like such a beautiful poetic backdrop, you know, even though it's a little silly, right, with this like pup revolution going on in the background, it still folds in thematically into the episode, which I thought was really fun.
It's great.
We love Adventure Time.
It's great. I fucking love this show.
It's so good. Yeah.
Like, even if like the finale swung around and I kind of came away from it like, yeah, it was pretty good, when I would have liked to have been like, yeah, that was amazing. I don't even really care. Like this whole season has felt like an event.
Oh yeah, for
sure. Start to finish, showing up every week for the episodes really felt like an event. It's been a long time since I felt that way.
For sure. It's been a lot of fun, and also doing these streams has been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
What else should we talk about? I guess we got to talk about like the Scarab going into Fionna and Cake's world and that whole plot line.
AKA the Scarab is a dick.
I'm kind of actually jumping all over the place a little bit. Let's finish talking about Shelby and Beth first, actually, and maybe we can talk about Casper and Nova, because there's not a lot to say about Casper and Nova. I feel like
Nova,
it's pretty straightforward.
It's fairly straightforward, but it's kind of perfect for that.
It's beautiful though. Yeah, I love the way they approach that. First of all, the visuals, like the early GameCube style visuals for the video game was super cute.
I wonder if they brought back the 3D guest artist they had for the episode called The Glitch.
Oh, maybe.
I wonder if they did that. That would have been really cool. I really like The Glitch. It's a good guest animator episode. Yeah, we predicted something, which is that we would get a replay of the
bus stop scene, right?
Of the bus stop scene, but it would play out a little differently the second time around, and we get like a different kind of perspective on it, which we did get, and it's beautiful. It's just sad, isn't it? Like the whole thing is just sad. And there's I think my favorite thing about all of this is the acute body horror. No one's talking about the acute body horror of Adventure Time, of which there is quite a lot, actually, if you think about it. There's a lot of body horror that goes on in Adventure Time. I don't know if you remember the episode with Brock.
I don't remember that one.
Brocco, yeah, he's the suitor who wants Princess Bubblegum's hand in marriage, and he's willing to do anything, and he makes a dark pact with Peppermint Butler to be irresistible to women, but it's like a monkey's paw thing, and he just like goes through hell and back in that episode. It's really toxic.
Yeah.
And he gets like horribly disfigured by lava and arrows and poison and stuff, and it's like by the end he's just like a monstrosity. But like, there's something really haunting about those Golbetty scenes. Like, there's something really haunting. There's a haunting dissonance, I feel, between seeing Betty as Betty and seeing Golbetty and what Betty has become.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is a bit of body horror to the idea that Betty has just been physically subsumed into this horrifying creature, you know, that it adds a real sense of punctuation to those scenes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
It makes them forlorn. It makes them really creepy and sad.
Yeah.
You know, like it adds a different meaning to it adds a different meaning, I guess, to Simon's actions. Like Simon learns by the end, but in many ways it's too little too late because the damage has already been done.
And that's like the point too, right? It's like you've made the choices you've made and you don't like the outcome. You don't like the last two choices that were in the last chapter. Well, maybe those wouldn't have been your last two choices if you had, you know, chosen something else in the middle, right? That's the whole point of Casper Nova, is to teach Simon that lesson.
And Betty made choices too. It's like
exactly. They both made choices. Yeah.
They were both dumb idiots, is what the story is about.
I mean, we get that little moment with Casper Nova, right? Where, you know, Nova shoots like some sort of spell or something, and Casper is like, oh, good job, Nova. And Nova is like, oh, I just, you know, did the spell that you showed me, right? And so she's both downplaying her own contributions and actions, as well as romanticizing, right? And uplifting and Casper onto a pedestal. And enabling, exactly. So yeah, again, it's like, you know, we talked a lot about Betty last week, and I think maybe it was a hot take at the time. Maybe I think people more see where we were coming from, like where
because we were right.
Because we were right about how Betty and Simon's relationship was not as perfect as maybe some people thought it was. And I really love that we're getting a deeper exploration into that, right? Where it's like, you know, I would not use the word toxic to describe their relationship, right? It's not like they were toxic. It's not like they were abusive. It's not like anything like that. But they were just unaware. They were just ignorant. They were just naive, and they were just too infatuated with this idea of who the other person was in order to make the best decisions in their relationship, right? And I love that moment too with the book, right, where you know, they make a wrong decision and they try to go back one page to see like what would happen if they had chosen something else, but like it burns the page, right? And it's like, no, there's no do-overs with this one. And I mean, like, yeah, maybe that's a little bit on the nose when it comes to like a metaphor about life. Like, yeah, of course there's no do-overs or redos, but
But it kind of works out perfectly, because there's the implication that, I mean, didn't Simon write that book?
It's kind of left up in the air.
But like by the end, we see that that little girl is making notes.
Is drawing them,
maybe
right?
She wrote it, and maybe she did that on purpose. Maybe
right.
There's like a, you know, like a purposeful kind of thing to that. The way that the books are guns is really funny to me.
That is also very random and funny. Yeah,
this is like a very strange design choice.
Yeah,
I bet Americans would love books if they were a bit more like guns.
Yeah.
Sorry, not sorry. I have to comment on
Roly Zoly. I just read what you said in the chat.
I'm sorry. I've been looking at that for the last like 3 minutes while you were talking, and I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna kink shame. But I am gonna
I don't disagree with you, Rolly. I don't disagree with you.
She's a big red monster with a
but
weird
also
cuboid head who's got like a weird fat baby body and horrible teeth. Are you guys okay? Should I be worried? Should I be worried? I really feel like I should be worried here. I'm a bit worried.
Oh my god. They didn't have to put the Lich in all those sexy poses though. Like they really, I feel like that was intentional. They had his legs spread apart on his knees. They didn't have to do all that. What is happening? What are these streams? I think we just have to end it here. I don't think we can continue. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Oh my god. Anyway. Oh, how do we move on from that? Have we talked about the cool stylized 3D backgrounds in the book? We did not, but the 3D GameCube
I mean, I
style.
did just talk about that. I asked if anybody knows if the
the animators, yeah,
if the animator who did the glitch worked on this, or one of the other 3D animator guest animators, worked on this, because that would be cool. Because I know they brought back the other guy who did Food Chain to do that.
Right.
Dancey singy dancey bit in the Winter King episode.
Right.
And I really liked the glitch. I think the glitch is a really good guest episode. It's one of the more underrated ones.
Right.
But yeah, I wonder if anybody knows that. If anybody knows, let us know. And if you have any sexual opinions about Golbetty, don't let us know. I don't want to know. Keep it to yourself.
Hey, I'm not gonna judge or shame anyone here. I
am.
So, by the end of this book, right, Simon gets these two choices, right? Either Nova gets crushed by the door, or he has to drink a potion that makes him forget her forever, right? And obviously that's very similar to like what happened with the Ice King, right? He had to wear the crown and forgot Betty, and so it's obviously a very close parallel to their actual lives. Then we get that no, this is not like when we get the bus stop scene, but Simon gets put back into his own head once he learns this lesson. I love that just little moment of Shermie being like, I was a prisoner in my own mind. That was very funny. I also there was another funny bit in there, which was the bit with Pawn Swan flipping them the bird and then telling them to eat feet. Which was just so random, but also very.
I mean,
funny.
Hey, some people are into that.
True.
People like that.
And so Simon gets back into his own head. He goes back to talk to Betty, and we get that replay, right, of the bus stop scene. And it does seem to me that this is like present day version of Betty actually like talking to Simon, right? Like it's framed in the flashback, right? But obviously this is current day Simon talking, and I think that this is like Betty talking. It's
one of the many ways that Golbetty is communicating with Simon.
Right, exactly, because she can't actually like talk out loud, right? And so
well, maybe she's just being obtuse. Maybe she totally can talk out loud and she's just fucking with him.
Yeah, and they have this dialogue, right, where it's like, Simon says, yeah, let's go check out the petroglyphs, let's get on the bus together, but this is not how it happened, right? This is not actually how it played out. And Betty's saying like, yeah, we could have made better choices, but I don't regret them, right? So it's interesting because like Simon made mistakes and Betty enabled those mistakes, but she looks back on those with fondness, right? She still doesn't have regrets, and this is why I don't call their relationship toxic or abusive or anything like that,
no,
right?
It's much more complicated.
Exactly, it's more complicated than that. Yeah.
It was just a bit of a mess.
It was just messy. Exactly. It was just messy. And they just didn't know how to communicate with each other their needs. And Betty as a character has always been the type of person to sacrifice herself and give herself up for Simon. We saw that throughout the original run of the show too, right? When she jumped through the portal, right? And came to the future, when she put on the Magic Man's hat, she started to lose herself, right? So she's always been this character, and it's interesting to me that both she and Simon are looking back on their experiences and are able to recognize that they have made mistakes, but it's not as simple as just like we made mistakes and we fucked up, right? It's they still look on it as like, you were a wonderful experience, right? And you were everything to me, right? And they still love each other by the end of this. And I love the way that they have kind of like brilliantly tied together these like almost two separate character arcs into this one story when it comes to Simon and Betty. Like, Simon not only had to learn that his current life has value and that he has something to him that is beyond just his relationship with Betty, so he had to like learn that lesson for him to continue on to his current day life, but also he had to learn this lesson of not romanticizing the past, not using the past as like this coping method of escapism, of fantasy, and actually seeing the past for what it is, right? And not looking at it through rose-tinted glasses, and acknowledging that, yeah, maybe everything wasn't as rosy as I thought it was. There were mistakes, there were things that didn't go as planned, and that's also important because you need to be able to acknowledge the mistakes of your past in order to move on, right? Like, he could not have moved on from his pain and his grief of Betty if he did not see the relationship for what it truly was, right? It wasn't this perfect romantic sweeping romance that he thought it was. It was just an experience that he had.
It was a relationship.
It was a relationship. Exactly. And now he is not able to pursue that relationship. They can't be together. And so what does he do with his life now? He has to figure that out, right? He has to make that meaning and continue with his life going forward, right?
I understand that some people didn't see that as a happy ending, because what they wanted was for the romance to be reignited.
Right.
Not to say that you missed the point entirely, if that's what you think, but if that is what you think, then I am really sorry to say that you missed the point entirely. And one of my favorite things about the conclusion of Simon's story is getting to see him interact with kids again. I kind of like, because I pointed out, I pointed out early on how Simon's relationship with kids and his like paternal coding is one of the most important aspects of his character, which makes it disappointing on one hand that we didn't get to see him speak to Marcy. I really would have liked to see that. I hold on that.
Yeah.
But it does make it satisfying to see him actually go back and get a do-over with that girl from episode 2.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
Because I pointed out that girl in episode 2 as like a deliberate inversion of the first time we ever see Simon. And I don't mean the Ice King, I mean Simon.
Right.
Because obviously he shows up. I mentioned this in the first stream. You can go back and watch that for more detail. But he shows up in the episode I Remember You. That's the first time we ever see him. And it's him, it's supposedly the first time him and Marcy meet, and Marcy is out in the middle of a street just like crying, and he goes up and he comforts her, and he stops this little girl from crying, and he gives her Hambo, which would obviously become one of her most prized possessions. And then you have like a purposeful, like complete inversion of that in episode 2 of Fionna and Cake, where he takes something away from a girl and makes her cry.
Yeah absolutely.
The opposite of that. And it feels like a betrayal of what we know him to be, like he's betrayed himself, like he's forgotten his own core values as an individual, which he obviously over the course of the story rediscovers.
Yeah.
And it's just nice. I like that we got to see that. I like that. Yeah. That to me is the happy ending. Like,
yeah. And something I just want to like touch on really quick. This is something in my notes too. This idea of Simon, having this like paternal instinct in him, right? And we see in like the epilogue, kind of like there's that last couple scenes that we get at the very end, the happy ending, right? And we see there's like a little moment with him and the girl Astrid, where she's drawing Casper Nova, and we also see a little moment where he's back in the bar, and interestingly he's talking to the bartender, dirt beer guy, and TV is there too. TV being one of Jake's kids.
One of Jake's kids, the fat nerd one.
Yeah, and I do completely agree with you that it's a shame that we didn't get a moment with Simon and Marcy. I thought it was also interesting that we don't get a moment with Simon and Finn at the end too, but we do get these two little moments, right, with Simon and the fangirl and Simon and TV. And again, we can talk here and say whether we like it or dislike it, but the way that I want to interpret that is, in the first episode, the second episode rather, we saw Simon really struggling, right, to connect with the modern day humans of Ooh. And the way that I interpreted that was, as we get older, it becomes harder and harder for us to connect with the younger generation, the new generation, right? And we talked in that first stream about like what the hell is a TikTok, right? And all that stuff. And so I interpreted this finale, since we got these intentional specific moments with the fangirl, with TV. There's specifically people who are from this younger generation. And so I interpreted that as like Simon, now he's making these intentional efforts to go along with the change of the world, right? He's and he, even at the end, right, he says, I think I'm going to move out of my, 20th century apartment, right? And so I feel like for Simon, the lesson for him also was that like he had to embrace change, right? He had to change along with the world around him. So it's like, yes, it would have been really nice to get a moment with Marcy. Yes, it would have been really nice to get a moment with Finn, but I feel like in lieu of that, they're trying to give us this idea of embracing change, connecting with the younger generation, following that paternal instinct that he has. That's how I saw that ending anyway.
Yeah, I think I just missed them.
Yeah, that's completely fair. That is
I really feel like even in Adventure Time proper, we didn't get enough of those two.
For sure. I completely see that. Yeah.
Even now we're still being kind of blue balls over Simon and Marcy, which feels cruel in many ways, because I remember you and Simon and Marcy are like two of the best episodes of television ever written.
Right.
And they're both Rebecca Sugar episodes.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I in lieu of the fact that I still feel like we haven't had enough. Just
completely fair.
Normal.
Completely fair.
I would like. I would. Here's my pitch. Here's my pitch to the showrunners of Adventure Time,
because we know they're watching.
We know they're watching. Yeah, they obviously tune in every week and chime in the chat. I would love to see this be an ongoing thing that doesn't specifically revolve around Fionna and Cake. Like imagine like Fionna and Cake is season 1, and then season 2 is Simon and Marcy, and we get to see them go on,
that would be fun,
and an adventure, and see them, but I don't know what storytelling is there to be had there. I don't know. That would be cool. It would be see other characters.
It would be cool. Really quick, I just want to give a shout out. Rolly let us know that it was Louis Zong most likely who did those animation sequences, and I love Louis. I've been a fan of his animations since he posts. He posted a lot of them on YouTube, and he comes from the YouTube animator world. So I'm very happy to see him in these episodes. That's awesome.
I like Louis Zong. He's cool.
Yeah, he's a cool dude. Okay, I think we pretty much said everything we wanted to about Simon and Betty, right? And Casper Nova.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Let's talk about Fionna.
Let's talk about Fionna.
So I know before we get really into it, I know that we talked a little bit about this already, about how we were a little disappointed, maybe you more so than me.
I don't know
not disappointed. Yeah.
I don't know if disappointed is the word. We don't need to talk about that anymore anyway. Like I've already said that. Like we know where we stand on that. Let's just look at the content that we did get.
I just want to get into what we have, right? Okay, so we get into Scarab, jumps into the portal. He is making his way into Fiona's world. Meanwhile,
he's making his way downtown,
making his way through the world today. But then no. Anyway, so he meanwhile we get this conversation, right, with Fionna and Gum Lee, and Fionna is explaining to them about,
excuse me, the proper ship name is Gary Marshall.
Gary Marshall, that's right. And she is explaining to them about Simon, about how they are all in this dude's head, and how, he's a candy prince and Marshall's a vampire, and he's kind of weirded out about it at first, but then Gary's like, I'd still like you if you were a vampire, which is very sweet.
Well, Gary, as we can tell, Gary has some pretty questionable tastes, because he thinks that the Scarab is
oh
hot.
No, he's hot. Yeah.
Which, I'm like, Gary, come on, dude. This weird, that's just like a man in a suit of armor with a creepy bug.
But also, he would be the kind of guy to be attracted to that kind of dude. Let's be real. Let's be real.
I don't know if I'm okay with that.
But we get this conversation with them, and Gary is like, are we still going to remember each other when the world resets? Because I don't want to forget, how we met, and
which parallels the whole dilemma with putting on the crown.
Exactly. And Gary and Marshall, they have been a super cute romance and a super a fun thing to watch their dynamic play out and their chemistry as we've been seeing their relationship progress on screen. But as we talked about in the Winter King episode, and we talked about this a little bit last week too, like they tie in thematically into these episodes, into this miniseries really beautifully and really deftly, right? Like, and I think we can pretty directly compare Marshall and Gary to Simon and Betty, right? Where we are seeing kind of an inverse of these two different types of relationships, where Betty is the type of character to completely sacrifice any sense of self in order to, uplift this person that she's idealizing. Meanwhile, we're seeing Gary and Marshall, who are two characters who are refusing to let the other person sacrifice themselves for their own sake, right? Gary refuses to let Marshall give up his own sense of self and identity and, be consumed by his mom's desire for his purpose, right? Like, again, like the Lich is relying on gold for purpose. Marshall tries to appease his mom by going on with what she thinks his purpose should be, but Gary is the person who steps in and is like, no, you're not going to do that for me, right? And so they have that that love for each other that allows them to see that you are, sacrificing yourself for me, and I'm not going to let that happen. Whereas, like, that's something that Betty and Simon were missing in their relationship, right? That's not something that they had. So it's really beautiful to me the way that they've kind of inversed these two relationships and shown us that Gary and Marshall really were the kind of like, hey, this is what a healthy relationship looks like, right? And I really love the way that they kind of played off of each other in that way. But we get that conversation where they're like, we don't want to forget, right? And it just also really goes to show this idea of we make our own kind of meaning, right? Because you could argue, us as the audience could argue, right? Like, Gary has nothing to worry about, right? Like, we know bubbling is like the ultimate ship that's going to come true in every universe, in every version of this like relationship. Like, they're going to have feelings for each other, right? And that doesn't matter to Gary, though, because this is this version of his relationship. He cares about the experiences that they've had, the memories that they've had. And like, even if someone were to tell him like, no, you have nothing to worry about, like, I don't think that would be enough for him, because he values his current life and his experience that he's had so far.
It's not necessarily the case that everything's going to work out fine for them in every universe, because it's been demonstrated to
and
us
we've also seen, right, that they did want to kill each other in that one universe.
Like, they might have had a history at one point, but they ain't doing so hot now.
Right.
So they plummet to their death. They're probably dead, because they do not go. The tank comes, but they don't.
Right.
So they're probably dead. Pet butt tank.
Yeah.
I'm glad we got to see Peppermint Butler in some capacity, because Peppermint Butler was always one of my favorite characters from the original series.
He's fun, yeah.
One of the most consistently funny as well.
For sure.
Was Peppermint Butler one of the ones... Who voiced Peppermint Butler?
I do not know.
Let's have a look. Voice actor. Steve Little. Good job, Steve.
Good job, Steve. But yeah, I think that this idea of like this version of our relationship is precious to me, coming from Gary. I think that also ties into the idea of, at the end of this episode, at the end of Fiona's arc, we get a callback to the first episode with the dandelion, right? And this wish, this wish that we get. Oh gosh, how I'm blanking on how I was going to tie these 2 points together. Yes, this idea of intentionality. So I want to talk. I'm kind of jumbling all over the place a little bit here, but that's because this episode ties these ideas together. So
there's lots of ideas. There's lots of moving pieces.
Exactly. So Hunter also kind of joins the fray at this point, right? So Scarab shows up. He's like causing chaos, and Hunter also shows up, and he's there to help them, you know, trap the Scarab in the jars and whatever, right? And we talked about this a little bit off stream. This character of Hunter and also Huntress Wizard, right, in the original show, right, because they're basically the same character. They don't get a lot of screen time. They're really only there. Huntress Wizard is really only there at the end of the series. But it is kind of implied that there's a relationship with Finn, right? Whether it's romantic or not, I don't want to definitively say. It's implied
with Finn. It's clearly romantic.
Yeah,
with Finn.
It is implied. But whether or not it's romantic,
it's said outright. Like she says to him, they kiss. She says to him that they know that they're both in love with each other. Like
but they do still have a relationship even to the present day, right? Because we saw in episode 2, Finn has that line where he's like, "I'm gonna go stop by Huntress Wizard," right? So they still have a relationship. They're still close. But Huntress Wizard, you know, she never has a character arc per se that we see on screen. She doesn't have that much depth to her, and so we were talking off screen about this. About how Huntress Wizard and Hunter are kind of, what is a word that you used? It was really, it made a lot of sense to me when you said it, but they're not necessarily, they're like symbols, right? They're like ideas for larger concepts. Synecdoches. Yes, that was the word that you used. Thank you. They're synecdoches for larger ideas and larger concepts. And the thing that they symbolize, and I think Hunter, especially in this miniseries, symbolizes, right, is these ideas of connection to nature and how the natural world is something that we can both learn from and connect with and needs to be taken care of and is precious, right? And I think that that's a big theme of Adventure Time in general, right?
I mean,
like
the food chain episode.
Exactly, the food chain episode. And then there's like that islands episode, right? Where they're like on the island with all the nature weather phenomenon going on, right?
Jake the Brick.
Yeah, Jake the Brick, right? So the force of the idea of nature being a force is something that the show really underscores throughout the entire series. And I love tying in nature and plants into this metaphor of life, because we get that moment in the first episode with Hunter saying, like, you know, weeds, anything can be a weed or not, right? We can decide that a plant is not a weed, like this dandelion. We can decide, like, no, this is actually something that I want to foster and grow and like nurture and put intention and thought and time into in order to make this something that I care about, right? And even if other people don't care about it, even if other people are going to look at this and say, oh, that's a weed, we need to get rid of that, I am going to look at this and say, no, this is precious to me and I'm going to take care of it, right? And so Hunter comes in at the end of this episode and with that brings all these ideas of nurture and intentionality and this connection to nature.
Obviously, like, runs contrary to what the Scarab believes, which is that you're a mistake. Like, this whole universe is a mistake.
The Scarab sees it as a weed that needs to be taken out. Exactly. So that plays into it.
And the universe is literally a dandelion, so you know.
Exactly, and that's how it comes.
There's that intentionality there.
Exactly, 100%. So these ideas all come into play once Hunter kind of enters the fray, which I think is just really brilliant, because I think, like, if you're gonna kind of tie these ideas together, I think, like, Hunter, with his limited screen time, right, kind of ties these things together in that way, which I thought was really well done.
Yeah, and Magical is making a very good point about. I thought about this as well. That it is probably an intentional reference to Horton Hears a Who, which is one of the most famous cartoons ever.
For sure. You know, a person's a person, no matter how small, right? That's
and they're the whole little world on top of a dandelion.
Exactly. Yeah, so I really loved that. I thought that was really beautiful. Yeah, and so Fionna like the scarab coming through. First of all, I love the moment where LSP releases the scarab. I thought that was just
LSP.
that was just such a funny callback, right? Because like he was just like this
LSP is a
comedic character.
useless asshole.
He was just like this comedic character that like popped up, like bring me back something, like just for a laugh. And then now in this finale, like it's a callback to that joke as well as relevant to the plot. He's gonna like release the scarab now, which I just thought was fun.
LSP is such a useless prick.
That joke too, where like the scarab like destroys the building, and he's like, "Oh no, LSP was in there," and they all just like look at him. That was so good, so funny. Yeah. So as the scarab is like tearing apart the universe, right? This is the catalyst that makes Fionna realize, like, no, this is like actually the world I want to protect. This is the world that I want to fight for. And at that moment is also when Betty puts Simon back into his own head. And so again, whether it was intentional on Betty's part or not, again, or if it was just poetic timing, you know, Fionna coming to the realization that the crown is not the answer, and Simon coming to the realization that the crown is not the answer, happening at the same time to protect Simon from putting on the crown, right? And then we get that little dialogue where they are talking on the phone, right? And she's like, you know, don't put on the crown, right? And so that
I loved that whole bit.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
whole bit was very emotional.
Yeah.
I love that they stay in contact as well.
Yeah, I'm so happy that they are at least able to, you know, text each other at the end. That makes me so happy.
Toon, I use a clip from the Chuck Jones Horton Hears a Who in my Steven Universe video, so
nice.
So I'm a real one.
Scarab, you know. So okay, yeah. So we get the wish. The kind of metaphysics of how all that works is something I question, but don't want to question too hardly.
It doesn't
really matter. Yeah, like why the frick did Simon cough up a universe? Who knows? How is he putting it in the back of his own head? Who knows?
Have you never done that before?
No.
I did it just earlier today.
Oh, you coughed up a universe?
Yeah, and put it in
the back of your head.
Why are you something funny?
No.
Why did you laugh?
Anyway, so
why did you laugh?
Because
answer me, you coward.
Because you're ridiculous. Anyway, yeah, so exactly how that works, who knows, but we don't question it. But yeah, I just thought that was a beautiful moment. You know, the dandelion, of course, calling back to the wish in the first episode, where in the first episode, I think we can pretty safely assume that Fionna is wishing for a more magical existence, a more exciting life, right? Whereas in this moment, she's wishing for things to stay the same and for things to stay as they are, because this is the world that she wants to fight for. But
I don't know if it's necessarily that she's wishing for things to stay the same, but like, because nothing stays the same,
right?
They take the world and they fix it up and they make it into something magical on their own terms, using what they're given.
Yeah, and I think
sacrificing the good things that are there.
Exactly, and I think like this finale, you know, there can be some criticism to be said, and I won't dwell on this, but there could be some criticism to be said of, oh, you know, this conflict was like resolved a little too, like, not quickly, but you know, like, oh, we're gonna solve this problem by smashing with a giant hammer or whatever, right? And there could be something to be said about Baby Finn and Peppermint Tank and, you know, the two Destiny kids like showing up out of nowhere and being like, oh yeah, we're gonna live here now.
That was the one part that I didn't enormously care for.
Yeah,
it didn't enormously affect my experience of the episode either. So
yeah. So it was a bit weird. I think that like that's fair, but the way that I interpreted that, right? You know, Fionna eats the strawberries and she like grows skyscraper size and she's like, this is my number one fantasy, right? And
you know there's something sexual going on there. Like,
the writer's barely disguised fetish or whatever.
I've been on the internet long enough to know I'm not an idiot.
So she says that line, which is of course a callback, right? I mean, she's been saying that line throughout the entire season of like, oh, this is my top 3 fantasy or whatever, and it's always been played off as a joke. And in this moment, it is of course comedic once again as she grows to the size of a skyscraper. But the way that I interpreted it as well too, and you know, Cake turns into the giant hammer, and she's like smashing, and we get that little chiptune musical riff in the background as well too, which is the same exact riff that happened in the first episode in that dream sequence. And the blocking of the choreography is also very similar to the dream sequence of the first episode. So the way that I interpreted this little fight scene and the callback to that first episode was I feel like the show is having a little bit of a more nuanced take when it comes to the idea of escapism and fantasy, right? Like we've been seeing, especially throughout the first 6 episodes especially, right? Like the writers have been pretty hard on the side of like escapism and fantasy is not healthy and it's not sustainable and it's not something that will like fuel you long term, right? But I feel like with this finale, the writers are kind of not necessarily backpedaling on that, but they're just saying like, it's okay to indulge a little bit in fantasy, in escapism, in magic, because Cake also stays magical by the end of this, right? They still have the tank at the end of this, right? All the Destiny kids are still here by the end of this. So the way that I interpreted that is like a little bit of magic in the world. And it's to that point too, where like things are changing slightly, right?
I guess I don't think magic ever specifically represented escapism. I think magic represented many things, and I think escapism was part of that.
Sure.
But that's not all the magic was in the context of the story. I think the magic represented many things, you know.
Sure.
The fact that the characters wanted to escape is more of a motivation than a confirmation of what it specifically represents, you know, because there's magic, there is magic in their world. We talked about this. There is magic in their world. You've got the whole thing with Gary and Marshall. That's magic.
Yeah.
Don't you think? You know,
no,
like
yeah,
everything
absolutely.
they're doing, is that not magic? Like the whole scene where they're going through the winter market, that's fucking magical.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Beautiful.
And the way that I also interpreted it is not just that magic is something that we're allowed to indulge in a little bit, but I feel like also the fact that these are specifically characters that we have like met along the way on this journey, right? And these are not only characters, but they're representations of Fiona's experiences and Fiona's like lessons that she's learned throughout her journey. And like maybe it's a little corny, but like, you know, maybe the magic is the friends we made along the way, right? Kind of deal. And I think by the end of the episode, she does come to this like newfound appreciation for things, right? And I feel like that kind of plays into that as well.
I think that the magic is kind of what you make of it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
You know, magic doesn't have to be such a literal thing.
Exactly.
But you know, that's just my take. That's just what I think.
That's what I think. Cool. Yeah, when she says like it's just a normal world at the end, and then like the tank just like rolls through, like that was not just a funny moment to me, right? But I just saw that was like encapsulating that whole ethos of like normal world, but a little bit of magic is good.
Peppermint butt tank.
Butt tank.
I don't know what else to call them.
Oh my gosh. There was one more thing I wanted to talk about when it came to Gold Betty, and I think kind of also speculating a little bit on season 2. So I'm a little annoyed with myself actually, because after we had our conversation last week about the nature of Simon and Betty's relationship and the flaws within their relationship, to me, I was sitting there thinking, and I was like, the only thing that makes sense to me for Betty's character arc is if she does not stay with Simon at the end and she has to unfuse from Golb. Because I was thinking sitting there, like, it doesn't make sense for her to stay fused with Golb at the end, because that reinforces this idea of her sacrificing herself for Simon, right? Completely giving up her sense of identity for Simon, which plays into the lesson that Simon has to learn about letting Betty make her own choices. So yes, that fits with Simon's character arc, but it didn't sit right with me that Betty is essentially sacrificing herself as a character for the sake of Simon's character arc. That felt to me like essentially fridging, and I felt like Adventure Time was better than that. Like maybe I was like, you know, putting my faith into the writers in that sense, but I was putting my faith in the writers that they would not do that to Betty, that they would do something a little bit more, you know, substantial with her character than just saying like, no, her whole point of her character is to have Simon like learn this lesson about moving on, right? Like that just didn't sit right with me. And so as I was thinking about this, I was like, the only thing that makes sense to me for Betty's character is if she unfuses from Golb and then like dies, like legitimately dies, because we also got that line from Fionna in episode 8 where she was like, everybody dies, shouldn't they get to die as themselves, right? And so I thought that was going to play a part into Betty's story, and she's going to finally get that, you know, sense of identity back, and she's going to also get to die as herself. And because it's Adventure Time, I was thinking if she dies, the best thing that would happen for her character after that is get reincarnated, right? Because then she does get to make her own choices, live her own life, you know, apart from Simon, right? And get to live the life that maybe she would have if not for the relationship that she consumed herself with. So before the episode even came out, I had this prediction in my head of Betty's gonna unfuse from Golb and die and get reincarnated, and I fucking wish I wrote that down somewhere or like sent it to you on Discord or something, because that seems to be what kind of implied what happened at the end there, right? Like,
I don't know if she died. I don't know if she died.
I don't know if she died.
I don't know if we have any evidence that she died.
But reincarnated, right?
Reincarnated as what? As who?
Because at the end she gets on the bus and then turns back into Gold Betty as she's like leaving on the bus, and the glyphs on the bus change from airport to like some, you know, magical glyph or whatever, and allegedly someone has translated that, and it translates to comet.
Right. So, oh yeah, you told me this.
Yeah. So make of that what you will, right? Like I don't know if she's going to become a catalyst comet.
We see Gold Betty glow, right? As she's
and she's like turning blue, and the shape changes, and it's not like clear what exactly is going on there. I think it's kind of left up to be vague. But yeah, I saw that as potentially because also like Simon tosses the crown at the end of that sequence too, right? He gets rid of it and decides definitively, I'm not going to be Ice King. So to me, that could be like, you know, Betty's wish got fulfilled. She no longer has to be Golb in order to protect Simon because he's not going to put on the crown any longer. So maybe with that fulfilled, she, you know, doesn't need to be fused with Golb anymore and unfuses. So yeah, I don't know if that's going to lead into a season 2 or if it's just meant to be a like vague implication for Betty's ending. I know that some people interpreted like at the very end when Simon gets back into Ooh and he's like waking up in the field of grass, there's like a little butterfly that lands on his face. Some people have interpreted that as, oh, maybe that is Betty. I didn't necessarily interpret it that way. I kind of just saw the butterfly as like a symbol for you are about to go through a transformation. You're about to go through a change of your own, because we saw that same butterfly in episode 3 in the cake episode.
He has gone through a change, right? Because the butterfly is the result of the change.
Exactly, yeah. And we saw that butterfly in episode 3 in the cake episode, and that's also when Cake was about to go on her transformation, right? So that's how I interpreted that. Maybe it's a reincarnation of Betty and she's off to be a butterfly in her own world now. Yeah, I don't know, but yeah. So, but I wish I could have written that prediction down somewhere, because that just made the most sense to me for her character to both be separate from Simon and live her own life while also like getting to form her own identity and her own self and move on with her own choices and her own passions, right? So I don't know. I don't know if that's actually correct or if they're going to follow up on that at all whatsoever, but I just thought that was a good fitting end for her character.
I really hope we do get a season 2. That would be very nice. I was very impressed with what we got this season. Massively went way beyond what I expected.
Yeah.
In every conceivable way.
Yeah.
And it did really well. Like loads of people tuned in.
Yeah.
And we know how studios think. That as soon as something does well, they're like, oh, let's do more of it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
They did 13 Friday the 13th films.
Yeah.
They did 13 of those motherfuckers because they just kept making money. Give me
Yeah.
13 seasons of this, please.
Yeah,
please.
exactly. And they might have been also hinting at a potential next story when it came to like the Prismo stuff. So yeah, we didn't talk about really Prismo at all today. You know, he breaks out of the cube and he's kind of like glitching a little bit as he's like broken out. And then at the very end, we see him with the Scarab, right? And actually, I really like this scene with the Scarab here because the Scarab as a character, right? Like he's mostly there to kind of move the plot along, but I do like that they gave him a little bit of depth in the sense that, you know, he's this really dork ass loser type of dude who like doesn't have any friends, and he wants to be the Wishmaster because like he knows deep down that like everybody likes Prismo and he just like wants to be liked by everybody, right?
He's just like a loser who's stuck in middle management and pissed about it.
Yeah, and he like takes it out on everybody by like, you know, trapping people into eggs for like stealing office supplies or like the most tiny infractions and stuff, right? So he's like this loser, but I really, you know, testament to Prismo by the end of this, right? Because he's like, hey, I put in a good word for you and now we're like kind of friends, and hey, you should take a break and we should like do some fan fiction together, right? Like it's just kind of cute. And yeah, I like that Prismo is like that type of character who like is not going to hold a grudge. He's just going to be like, yeah, I can tell that you're just like a lonely sad dude, so we're just going to hang out for a bit and write some fan fiction together.
They're gonna dress up and travel together.
100%. Oh my gosh. Yeah, but there was like a little moment at the end too, right? In that scene where like Prismo's face glitches out. And I don't know if that's like, yeah, it's like for a couple of frames.
Was that just in scene when he's reaching for the TV?
No, that was like when he's talking to Scarab.
When he's talking to Scarab. Interesting. Yeah, I didn't notice that.
Yeah, it's like really quick. It's really easy to miss. And so
that's foreboding.
Yeah, isn't that kind of like ominous? Like, oh, is that potentially hinting at a season 2? Because I don't know if it's just because like, oh, maybe Prismo is still like recovering from his injury of having to break out of his cube prison.
Is Fionna and Cake gonna end up being the Better Call Saul?
Oh, right.
Adventure Time's Breaking Bad.
Right.
I hope it's better than Better Call Saul, because Better Call Saul kind of wasn't that good, but you know what I mean, like a whole full kind of turning into a whole full series of its own.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe there could be something more with the Scarab and Prismo. Also, just really quick side note, I just want to say I have grown significantly more fond of the Scarab ever since I have discovered that the Scarab's voice actor is apparently a trans woman. And she's incredible. Like her range and her voice acting is so good. So ever since I found that out, I have warmed up to the Scarab immensely. Like I'm so happy that they've included this character, and I just think he's so much fun, and so awesome that he's being played by a trans lady. That's just amazing. Trans feminine voice actors, I swear, have like the most incredible range, and they are like some of the most talented voice actors that I've had the pleasure of hearing. Like shout out to trans femme voice actors. You all are crushing it.
Well, you know, there are some people who are born with like the golden vocal range,
right?
Where you can get those low lows and you can get those high highs.
Yeah,
everybody has their own vocal range, which must really suck for some people who where that really contributes to their sense of dysphoria, their vocal range, their natural vocal range, because there's not often there's not an enormous amount you can do to alter,
of course,
your vocal range. It also sucks for singers too, because you know, if you're like me and your vocal range is like bang smack in the middle, you can't get the high highs and you can't get the low lows. You just get the mediocre mid-ground.
Right.
Fucking blows. But
no, you have a great singing voice though.
I don't know if I can't remember her name, the lady who voices the Scarab. I don't know if she also does singing.
Kaylee something, yeah.
Villains Wiki. Give me the voice actor information. Villains Wiki. Give it to me.
Oh, another little hint at potentially Golbetty's reincarnation. There was like at the very end, after the credits, I think this was, there were like two shapes. It was like a yellow cube and a red pyramid that was just like floating in the black void. And then they like merged together and they turned into an apple with like a ribbon on it. And allegedly I saw someone say online that that's like a common image that was used around Betty. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't remember that being a thing associated with Betty at any point of time, but maybe that's also potentially hinting at a season 2 with Betty or something reincarnation related. I don't know. I'm curious to know if anyone in the chat has any ideas of what that apple could have been.
Betty is tree trunks confirmed.
Betty is just tree trunks confirmed.
I would hate that.
Yeah, let's not.
That'd be awful.
I'm just going through my notes, making sure that there's nothing more I wanted to say. Yeah, voice actors and actresses are on another level when it comes to talent. I totally agree with you, Magical.
Well, provided they're good at it.
The ones in Fionna and Cake, at least, are
the ones who are good at their job. Like, not everybody's good at it. I feel like I'd be a pretty terrible voice actor if I tried.
Yeah. I want to get better at voice acting. It's hard, though. It's not easy.
Well, you know, most things creative are not easy.
Oh, we saw the corpse of Turtle Princess in the library. That was fun. Not the corpse. We just saw her shell, her empty shell.
She might be totally fine. I mean, turtles live a long time.
Yeah, you never know.
She might have just been like, I don't think turtles can do that. I believe the shell is actually physically connected to their body.
Yeah, she's long dead. Making sure I have nothing else in my note. Oh, there's another funny moment that I wanted to just give a little shout out to during the battle with Scarab. First of all, Kaiju Cake was really funny, right? When she turns herself into Godzilla, and she's like, I think I stretched myself too much. That was good. And then we get the little moment with Gary and Marshall too, where like Gary's like, I'll stop him. He's like throwing his biscuits at him, and it's like not doing
Marshall's
shit.
Like, I'm gonna defeat
Marshall's
him with
like,
the power of music.
The power of song, and he's like starts playing his guitar. And we get that moment with Gary where his eyes get all big, and he's like, oh my gosh. You're like, is it actually gonna work? And it's like, nah, they just get an ice cream cart thrown at them.
That 100% would have been me trying to save the day with the power of song.
The power of song. Yeah, I like how that's also kind of a little bit of a callback to the original finale too, right? Because they do win with the power of song in that episode, which is funny.
They win with the power of Rebecca Sugar.
With the power of Rebecca Sugar, yeah. They needed Rebecca Sugar in this finale. That's what they were missing.
That's what was missing. It wasn't a Rebecca Sugar. So if it was a Rebecca Sugar song, it would have won.
Yeah. What else is there in my notes? Oh, Fionna does the Finn scream at one point. Did you hear that? When Scarab like is like, I'm gonna fuck up your world, and she goes, ah!
I don't think I registered that, but to be fair, I don't think anyone can truly do the Finn scream except
for Finn, yeah. But she did her version of the Finn scream, which just tickled me. It just made me happy.
Jeremy Shada, is that the voice actor's name?
Jeremy Shada, iconic. Oh, and okay, one more thing I'll say about the Destiny kids getting transported to the Fionna and Cake world. It is kind of played for laughs. It's a bit strange because we never got confirmation on whether Farmworld Finn actually died or not. Like, did Jay just like abandon his orphaned siblings to like come live in Fionna world? Like, that part is a bit weird, and we don't really get any questions or answers to that. But I feel like another reason why they could have been there, and we get this line from them right at the end where they're like, we're so happy to be here, you guys even have functioning toilets, right? And I feel like that's really there to just underscore the idea of appreciate what you have, right? Like, appreciate the little things that you have, because I feel like, we talked about this in the first stream about how Fiona's character is just so relatable to a lot of us who are going through like similar experiences of like being in our 20s, of not having the career that we want, right? Of being tired all the time and struggling with finances and all these like struggles that like day to day that we deal with in our generation, very heavily relatable. But I feel like as Fionna has been seeing the problematic nature of escapism, been seeing kind of like the things of reality that need to be appreciated, right? You know, in the first episode, there's those two roller derby girls, right, who are like, you should join our gang, and she's like, fuck off. But then in the finale, in this episode, we see a little glimpse of her, and she's actually joined the roller derby gang, right? And she's like having fun, and so I feel like this finale is really underscoring this idea of like, appreciate the little things, you know, have fun where you can find it, and just be grateful at least that you've got functioning toilets in your world, right? Because it's not the thing that a lot of people have. A lot of people don't have functioning toilets. So, hey, at least you've got that going for you.
Be grateful for plumbing.
Be grateful for plumbing. That's the way that I interpreted that. So
ultimately that's the true meaning of the show.
That's the true meaning. Exactly.
You know? Maybe the Scarab doesn't have good plumbing, and that's why he's so fucking
I mean, it would make a lot of sense. It would make a lot of sense. Magical says that apples have a lot of symbolism, either knowledge, temptation, or hope, as a few examples. So yeah, maybe that could be hinting towards
apples have their own kind of like canonical interpretation in Adventure Time. They're like a leitmotif in Adventure Time.
Yeah. Where
they kind of, they're various things. I guess they are kind of like a form of temptation in Adventure Time as well. I guess we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah.
We'll see. I don't want to predict anything.
Yeah, I totally agree too, in that it would have been nice to have more Rebecca Sugar music and contributions towards the finale. But I'm happy with the finale. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I mean, the addition of a Rebecca Sugar song would have elevated the finale enormously, because she's just that good.
Yeah. But overall, I think that this finale was just so fun. Some of the humor was really awesome too. Like that moment where that giant island is just like, I'm the island of insight. Can you point me towards a body of water? And you're just like, this is the cutest Adventure Time character of all time. And then he unceremoniously gets murdered through the face. And I was so sad, but it was also really funny. So love the humor of these episodes. Love the way that they tied all these story arcs together. Really curious to see if they're going to continue with any of these plot threads or character arcs as we are kind of hinted towards a season 2. Before I watched the finale, I was kind of like, I feel like they're going to wrap things up. I don't know if I want a season 2. Now that we're on the other side of it, I'm open to a season 2. I won't be sad if we don't get a season 2, but I feel like there could be more that we could explore here that we could go into. So
100% on that page. Like when I went into this, I didn't want any Fionna and Cake at all. And then a few episodes in, I was like, this is amazing, but it feels like Endgame. And then we got to the end of it. I'm like, that whet my appetite. I could do with some more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's how I feel.
I like being proven wrong.
I do too.
Feels good.
Feels good to be wrong. But I think that's about all I had to say here. Those are all of my notes for the most part. Just really quick in that little epilogue thing as well too. This is my last note. Just seeing Gary and Marshall, kind of pursue their dreams in the epilogue too, right? Where we see the little food truck where Gary's selling the pastries out of, and Marshall is like playing the guitar off to the side. Like it's just nice, right? Again, it's this idea of like progress. You know, we're tending to our weeds, we're tending to our plants, taking care of them, even if other people are going to look at them and say they should be taken out, right? But no, this is important to us. We're going to take care of this. We're going to make our progress. We're going to, follow our dreams and our goals. And it's okay to indulge in that little fantasy a little bit, because we need something to get us through life, right? We need something to bring us joy and bring us a little bit of magic and fun in our lives. So I really love that little moment too.
It's not about whether or not you... It's just not about whether or not you indulge in magic. It's just about where you're getting it from.
Yeah, exactly. Are you getting it from, creating a giant escapist winter wonderscape where you are causing madness to the Candy Queen in exchange for your escapist fantasy? Or are you going to work hard and not let your loved ones sacrifice themselves for your goals and not harm people, and just focus on your own goals and dreams and work at it, right? Like I feel like that's the difference between Gary and Winter King, right, in that episode. So yeah, I really love that idea of like, where do your dreams come from, right? Why are you pursuing them, and what are you gonna do?
They get projected to me in my mind every night
with a beam of light in the middle of the night, right?
Light. Where do yours come from?
Oh, so good, so good. But yeah, I just love this idea of being intentional and nurturing in our choices, in our purpose, right? Because there's no one who can give us purpose in life other than us. We are the only ones who can determine what our life purpose is, and who cares if other people are going to look at that and say, that's a weed, you should get rid of that. It's like, no, I'm going to make my little pastries and be happy.
At the end of the day, pee is stored in the balls.
Stop. I hate you.
That's the meaning of the show.
Definitely a good conclusion. We'll see if they make a season 2. Yeah, totally agree. Magical. Down for more Adventure Time material in general, just because of how something like Fionna and Cake showed that they really haven't missed a beat. Yeah, absolutely. I trust the writers. I trust them to, if they're going to bring us a season 2, that they are going to actually have a story to tell and something interesting to say. I have full faith in that. So we'll just have to wait and see if it does happen. If it does end up getting announced, you can be sure that we will bring back these discussion streams as well too. For now, we are going to go back on, I guess, hiatus until we decide what we want to do for the future discussion streams. You know, we've talked a lot about doing Buffy, about, you know, restarting the She-Ra discussion streams again. I know like Arcane is something we started and then they announced season 2. So maybe we go back to that at some point. I don't know. There's a lot of ideas floating around our brains right now, but once we decide something and figure out when it's going to happen, we will be sure to announce it. So make sure you are, you know, keeping your eye on the community tab on my YouTube channel. If you're not in the Discord already, you know, that's kind of probably the best place to get immediate announcements. I think I'm better at posting on Discord now than I am on Twitter. But yeah, make sure to keep your eyes out for all of that, because we will be doing more streams and discussions in the future. It should be fun.
Do you have anything about the Sopranos?
Let's talk about the Sopranos. Yeah, exactly. Do you have anything else you want to say, Tom, before we wrap things up? I know you're still working on your Steven Universe video, so we got to make sure that people are subscribed to the Curmudgeon Media channel to make sure that they get that once that's out. It's going to be so good. I'm so excited for it. I have been loving all the little clips and stuff that you've shared with me so far, and it's going to be amazing. I'm so psyched for it.
It's going to be bloody long. It's going to be bloody long. If people want to get cozy and watch a jerky Englishman talk about how fucking beautiful Steven Universe is for an hour,
I'm sure everyone here actually genuinely does.
That's what I'm doing. That's what you can look forward to.
Absolutely, absolutely. Alrighty. Any more thoughts on Adventure Time? Any more final Fionna and Cake?
The only thought I have is that it's 9:11, and I'm tired and I want a cup of tea.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and let you go get your cup of tea. Yeah, I want to say thank you to everyone who joined us for all these streams. Yeah, thank you guys, Magical and Tune, you two as well, and everyone else who joined us in the chat for the stream. This has just been so fun. I love, like Tom was saying, this whole Fionna and Cake miniseries really felt like an event, and doing these discussion streams with you, Tom, and with the rest of the group has really added to that whole feeling. So I'm really grateful, really appreciative of everyone who decided to join us week to week and contribute their thoughts and ideas in the chat to these streams. It's just so fun. It's just a lot of fun. And I've been seeing all the numbers go up on my channel over the past month, and it's been giving me the good dopamine brain feelings as well too. So thank you all so much for all that. Really appreciate it. It really means the world to us that you would take the time out of your days to come spend it and geek out with us about this silly little cartoon and hang out and have a good time. It's been a lot of fun.
And give us your extremely controversial sexual preferences about Eldritch horrors.
This is the place for it. This is the place for it.
No, it isn't. It's not. We didn't ask for that. I didn't ask for that.
I'm asking
for it
anyway. I'm asking for it. But yeah, thank you all so much. Really, really grateful. It's been so much fun, and I hope that you'll join us again for future streams, even if it's not necessarily a show that you've seen, or maybe you will want to see it because maybe my constant talking about Buffy has got you a little bit curious about it. Maybe if I'm being hopeful.
There it is. There it is.
If I'm being hopeful. Maybe we'll do some group watches. That could be fun.
Buffy is, I mean, that's a monstrous thing for a person to get into at this point because there's just so much.
There's so much of it, yeah. But we'll start slow. We'll start with season 1 and work our way through. All right. I think we're delaying at this point. Thank you all again. We will see you all next time, and stay safe and take care in the meantime. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.